Okay, ready to dive into something really interesting? We're tackling the world of teaching gifted and talented students today, and we've got a ton of info from RoleCatcher to unpack. This is going way beyond your typical teaching job, right? This is about these kids who are just bursting with potential, the ones who challenge the norm and make everyone rethink what's possible.
Absolutely. And forget that idea of just giving them harder material. That's not even scratching the surface. It's more like you need a mix of like serious teaching skills, knowing how to read people, and a little bit of that creative spark. Almost like you're some kind of academic detective, right?
Yeah.
Searching for those hidden talents.
Okay, you've definitely got my attention. So let's break it down. What's the heart of being a teacher of talented and gifted students? What makes it stand out?
Well, think of it like this. These teachers, they create a space where these students don't just get by, they flourish. They're like architects, building these personalized learning experiences for each student's strengths and passions. And we're not just talking good at math or writing. It could be a knack for leadership. Maybe they're a musical genius in disguise, or even just a totally unique way of tackling problems.
So you're saying it's about spotting those sparks, those little flickers of brilliance, and figuring out how to help them catch fire. I can already see how this goes way beyond a regular classroom. But how do they even begin to do that? How do you identify and then actually nurture all these different talents?
That's where that whole detective thing comes in. The stuff we're looking at really emphasizes this thing called ongoing assessment. And no, it's not about standardized tests. It's more about really watching, interacting, understanding how each student learns best, what they're into, what they excel at, and yeah, even their weaknesses, like solving a puzzle to unlock their full potential.
Makes sense. It's got to be super personalized because these kids are anything but one size fits all, right? But let's say they've figured out a student's talent. How do they help it grow? The materials mention something about specific teaching techniques. What's that look like in real life?
They call it differentiated instruction. Basically, a fancy way of saying they change up how they teach to fit each kid. Like, instead of a boring old book report, maybe a gifted student gets to research and give a whole TED Talk on the book's themes. It brings in those presentation skills, the critical thinking.
Now, that's an awesome example. Not only is it a challenge, but it gets them fired up about learning in a way that regular teaching might miss.
Mm,
Sounds like you need a deep understanding of the subject, but also like the psychology of what makes gifted kids tick.
exactly. And don't forget, we're not just talking about brains in jars here. They're young people trying to find their way in a world that doesn't always get how their brains work, how they feel. It's super important to make a space where being gifted is celebrated, not just tolerated.
That really hits home. Nurturing the whole person, not just their brain power.
Speaking of nurturing, the materials talk about teachers acting as mentors,
Hmm.
guiding these students through the unique issues that come with being gifted. What does that involve?
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. Battling perfectionism, feeling like they have to be the best all the time, maybe struggling to connect with other kids who don't think like they do. These are just some of the emotional hurdles gifted kids often face. So these teachers, they wear a lot of hats. They're educators, mentors, sometimes even confidants, giving guidance, encouragement, and tools to handle those complex emotions. It's about teaching them to bounce back, stand up for themselves, and build a strong, safe of self. That's pretty amazing, being that trusted guide, helping them through the whole gifted experience. So for our listeners who are thinking, hey, that sounds like me, what does building a career in this field look like?
Okay, so picture this, right? You're starting out, fresh out of the gate as a teacher, and your head is just buzzing with new ideas, enthusiasm, all that. You're paired up with a more experienced teacher, learning the ropes, getting that hands-on experience. And as you go, you take on more, maybe leading your own classroom, designing specialized lesson plans, even spearheading stuff for the whole gifted program.
Wow, so there's definitely room to grow, to move up if you want to take on those leadership roles. It's not just about staying put, it's about making a bigger impact on gifted education as a whole. But hold on, let's talk practicalities for a sec. Let's say you've got the passion, you're all in, but how do you actually land a job in this field? That's where RoleCatcher comes in, yeah.
100%. And it's not just firing off a generic application. You got to show them you get it. You understand gifted education. Remember that networking thing we saw in the materials?
Hmm.
Super important here. Like going to those conferences, it's not just about grabbing free pens, right? It's about actually talking to experienced teachers, learning from them, showing you're serious about this. Think of it as a scavenger hunt, but for knowledge and connections, not cheap plastic toys.
I love that. It's about being proactive, showing you're in it for the long haul, not just a paycheck. But let's be real, interviews can be scary. What does RoleCatcher offer to help people nail those conversations?
Imagine having this secret weapon, right?
Yeah.
A digital toolkit with interview questions made just for gifted education. That's RoleCatcher. Thousands of possible questions on everything from teaching methods like acceleration and enrichment to handling a classroom full of bright sparks and even the ins and outs of how their minds work.
Okay, that's pretty cool. But it's not just about memorizing answers, is it? It's about knowing what they're really asking, right?
You got it. RoleCatcher helps you crack the code of those interview questions. Like, let's say they ask, how would you help a gifted student who feels left out or different? You don't just list some generic stuff. You show them you get the emotional roller coaster these kids are on and offer real practical solutions with empathy.
It's about showing them you're not just there to teach, but to connect, to guide, to really be a champion for these kids. But it's not just about the interview, it's making your resume stand out too. What does RoleCatcher do there?
So they've got this AI thing that analyzes your resume, compares it to what the job description actually wants. It's like having a personal branding expert who highlights all the good stuff and points out where you could improve. For example, if a school is all about hands-on learning and your resume only mentions traditional teaching, RoleCatcher flags that. It'll even suggest ways to showcase any relevant experience you've got.
So it's like a roadmap showing you the best way to tell your professional story. But beyond the whole getting the job thing, what are some of those things you can't really teach? The things that make a truly amazing teacher of the talented and gifted? What sets them apart?
It's tough to put your finger on, but it's like this passion they have, this unshakable belief that every student has something special to offer. But they've also got to be able to roll with the punches, be resourceful, bounce back. Because let's face it, this job, it's not always sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah, that's a good point. We've talked about the good stuff, the impact, but the role catcher materials also mention the possibility of burnout. What makes it particularly tough for these teachers?
Well, think about the emotional commitment.
Right.
Always having to come up with new ideas,
Mhm.
creating individual learning plans, being that constant source of support for kids who see the world a little differently. It can really take a toll, especially when you don't have enough resources, or you're dealing with administrators who don't quite get it, the whole gifted thing.
So it's not just teaching, it's advocating for these students,
Yeah.
fighting for what they need, and constantly pushing for a system that recognizes and values their unique talents.
Absolutely. In fact, the materials recommend a specific self-care thing for these teachers. Building a strong support system, connecting with other teachers in the field, swapping stories, finding a mentor. Those can be really important for staying passionate and avoiding burnout. Just remembering they're not in this alone.
It's like they say, it takes a village. And in this case, it takes a whole bunch of passionate educators to really make a difference for these amazing kids. Diving into this world, it strikes me how much responsibility these teachers have. They're not just shaping academic futures, but maybe even the future of innovation, creativity, leadership for years to come.
Makes you think, doesn't it? These kids, they're not just defined by test scores or how fast they learn something. They see the world in a different way, a different perspective on solving problems. Who knows? Maybe their contributions will change entire industries, shake things up, push the limits of what we think is possible.
It's exciting and a little bit awe-inspiring, to be honest. So for those listening who feel that pull, that desire to work with these bright minds, what's the one thing, the final thought you'd want to leave them with?
I'd say remember this. Every gifted student is unique, a whole world of untapped potential just waiting to be discovered. And your job as their teacher is to be the explorer, the guide, the cheerleader who helps them find their own way and share their gifts with everyone. It's definitely a journey, but the rewards for you and those kids, they're priceless.
That's a great way to put it. It reminds us that teaching, especially when it comes to gifted education, it's more than just a job. It's a passion, an honor, and a chance to shape the future in ways we can't even imagine. This deep dive has been eye-opening, and we hope it sparks something in all of you listening. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep believing in the power of these incredible minds.